Something in the beginning, and I was like, "Oh, I should have recorded that," but don't.
I can say it again. I can say it.
No, you. No, it's fine. It's fine. But I mean, to your point, though, it's funny because I had to do a Q&A for a class at the University of Michigan yesterday, and they are doing their final project is to create like a short podcast series.
Okay.
And so it was me and like two other folks who do podcasts, and one thing I have like been talking about every time someone asks me about this is the fact that you all steal and imitate Black women all day, every day, and yet refuse to ask them about their stories, their work, about like what makes them people. Like there's this still separation of like, it keeps you dehumanized, but not through like not through the avenue of like cruelty, just erasure. It's kind of like, well, yeah, we'll steal your food and your style and your language and your, and all the other things, but we won't ask you about you because that'll make you a human being. And so avoid that in order to objectify you for whatever reason. Because of course, like that conversation always falls into like a sexual category, but you can objectify Black women for a number of things. And so in order to continue to treat you like an object, we won't fill in the blanks. And so now that I have a podcast where I'm like intentionally bringing Black women on to go, tell me about you, talk to me about your story and your work. I have some who have been like who have spent plenty of time in media. So like your El Simones and your Katrina Smiths and like all those women who kind of get interviewed a lot in like local newspapers and that kind of thing. So they have a relationship with the process. They have a relationship with their own story to the point where they can like tell it very efficiently.
Okay.
But the vast majority of guests I've had have not had that experience.
Wow.
And part of it is an absolute skill set, something you have to practice. And then the other half of that is knowing how to like shape your own story. Because, when you tell it enough times, you learn how to edit it. And you learn how to like part down to the points that are really important to you that the audience needs to hear. If you've never had to do it before, though, it takes a while to get to that point. So it's stressful. And I think season 2 is when I kind of was very conscientious of the fact that when I invite people on, that I have to be mindful of the fact that this might be the first time this person's ever had a conversation about themselves in this kind of format where because I think we're up to over 60,000 subscribers at this point. Wow. So I'm not sure how many ears are hitting each episode, but it's well over 2,000 people listening to each episode at this point. And so to know that and go, okay, so this is the first time a lot of women have talked about themselves and had the floor to talk about their work and their challenges. And so I have to be really mindful of setting up a situation where like people don't feel nerve-wracked about it. And it's like, look, I just want to hear about you. Because then, you get this idea like, hey, a lot of people are like, well, it needs to sound a certain way or I need to use certain language. And I'm like, nah, and that's all I'm saying.
Not me.
I'm like, y'all learn from her.
Yeah,
just show up. Just show up.
I was nervous for different reasons. Honestly. And I mean, the story of how I even got here.
It's true.
The little tag. Yeah, I'm a tag.
You got nominated.
I got nominated. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. That's a great. Nice. I got nominated by the person in my house who I am calling now a traitor. But no, it was actually really good because I think back to like what you're saying about the erasure.
Yeah.
Sometimes because we're so used to getting erased, we don't even show up for ourselves like that. Yeah. So, and then I'm sure we're going like you start talking. I'm like, oh, we're jumping in this quick.
Oh yeah, we just I don't hold.
I like it. And honestly, like the real reason why I was going to tell you no, like probably every week for the last like month and a half. Okay. And
that's real.
No, and it's crazy because I was gonna tell you no, and I follow like now because Instagram, lovely place, you can see that there's like you're not alone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Corey, and I forget her last name, but she doesn't do my science. She does the like another type of science.
Mhm.
She said something that kind of resonated, and it was like, when do you call yourself a scientist?
Ooh. Yeah, that's deep.
And so for me, which is different from another food scientist that you'll probably interview, I am without a master's. So a master's degree. I shouldn't say master's because that like sounds a little
That
like
sounds weird.
I don't have no master anyway. Know
I was
that.
like, "Ooh, that sounds real.
No.
That sounds like
Yes.
real 18,
It
14."
did. It did. So I'm without a master's. So I was like, oh, can I be a food scientist? Like, am I a food scientist?
Mm,
And then it was like, also, it's like, well, I've worked for big companies, but I'm not like, in no way am I like vice president of R&D or quality.
got
So
you.
am I a food scientist even though I'm still trying to find my place? And then also I was just like, she's going to interview like another black food scientist who might have a vastly different experience. So, like, will my experience even get erased because, we're black, but without the whole monolith comment, there's different experiences within
Yeah.
that even like sector. So I talked myself out of it 1,000 times. I got yelled at by everybody. Um,
I'm so sorry.
No, it's true. Like it's true. Like I talked myself out of it. I got yelled at. Some of my friends even said some words. Okay, some words you can't say on Sunday. But one of my sorors, she had asked me to do like a food science presentation for her class
Okay.
virtually. This was like at the beginning of the pandemic.
Ooh, okay,
And
okay.
like, and this is again urban areas, so a lot of kids and all areas, a lot of kids are like right now, they don't want to do online school.
They
Like,
don't.
but I remember like the questions that they were asking.
Mm,
And I remember how like even the few kids that showed up, they were so stinking engaged. And I
aw,
was just like, if I don't do this, and I know my wife is probably gonna say she said it too, so we'll get that out the way too. But like, if I don't do this, like, am I missing an opportunity to talk about something that might hit somebody? So like, I guess like no slight to this podcast, but I was kind of like, well, okay, if a American Chemical Association asked me to do a podcast, they're going to ask about like all the technical things.
right, right.
But no, like we don't even have to. We don't want to talk about that because there's so much else.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and
So.
then that was the other thing, it was like, I mean, as a person who has worked in a kitchen and had to, like, create recipes and has to have
Mhm.
a general understanding or general understanding of food science just to do my job,
Mhm.
we those moments will probably find themselves into an interview, but for me, it's like, you can get on all those other podcasts and talk about science.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of spaces and platforms for that. Like, for me, like, I feel like my job is to put your story out in front so there's
Yeah.
context for your work. And so, I like to tell people like where you can engage with somebody's work and not necessarily about the work themselves, because you can do that better than I could.
Yeah.
And I had one other food scientist on so far, and our conversations are always vastly different. We spend a little more time talking about her work specifically because of the type of work she's doing right now,
Okay.
and because it's very timely. So, but we spent just as much time talking about her story and about how she ended up where she is,
Okay.
and where she hopes to go, what she hopes food science looks like the scope, and where she wants to really leave like a footprint or a mark in her work. And so, like for me, I always find that stuff really, really personal. It's like, okay, because nothing's permanent. And it's like, well, you might spend the next 5 years working in this space and then
Yeah.
decide that this is not for me anymore. So I just don't, I try not to subscribe to it too hard. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
if you are passionate about your work in that way, we will open the doors and you can talk about all of that. I am more interested in like you and how you fit into your own
For
world, and
sure.
you would how you would tell somebody, how you would tell a kid coming, a young woman coming out of school or a young person coming out of school, like, you know what? I recognize certain skills in you, or I recognize certain talents in you. And like
Mhm.
food science might be a space where you could flourish, or where you could chase your curiosities, where you can challenge yourself. Because I mean, one, there's not enough people, not enough Black people in the space, period.
Yeah.
And Black women, forget that. I mean, you less than a minority. And so it's like, but it also, I think food science is going to be essential. The work you guys do is going to be essential to the future of food. And I don't think people understand like that. The fact that what you do for work influences what we eat, how we eat, where we eat,
Mhm.
if we have something to eat at all.
Yeah.
So I just want people to know, like, behind every plate of food is a food scientist somewhere in the
Mhm.
process, in the chain. And so yeah, so we gonna get to that. But like you said, I jumped right on it. So go ahead and tell the people
Tell the
like your
people.
name and who you are and
All
all the
right.
things, all the basic details, and
All
we can
the
continue.
all the, invasive questions.
Yeah, all the essential. I was simple. You can tell them as much or as little as you want, as long as they have your name and what you do for a living.
Yes.
That's all I require. So if more
What
of that, if more comes out, that's up to you,
what if I don't know what I do for a living? Okay,
girl.
nah.
Explain it. You know what? I always tell people job titles are so weird because they box you in. So when someone's like, "Well, what do you do?" and I'm just like, "Ooh, okay." Do you want a real answer, or do you want the polite answer?
Yeah.
Because the real answer is I I create space for people to like shine. I create space for people to tell their stories, and I do that anywhere. Like it doesn't require me to be in a specific capacity, role, or title
Yeah.
in order to do my work. Now, if you want to know what my vocation is, what my business card says, what my boss says I do, what my job description is, that's a different question than what do you
Yeah, for
do.
sure. That
So you
makes
can
sense.
answer one of those either way you
Uh,
want to.
I'm trying to be in a healthy space right now with the answer because also I almost quit a few things. Okay,
Girl, look, and see, but that's important for people to know. Like,
listen.
look, walking away from things that don't work, walking away from things that don't make you happy, like
Yeah,
that's essential. That's an essential part of being a human being.
yeah,
And so I think as Black women, we don't get an opportunity to talk about those moments either, because
mm,
for us, failure is not an option. Changing our mind isn't an option.
mhm,
Making decisions that are best for our health and well-being is not an option, because Black women, apparently our value is only wrapped up in how much we suffer and how much labor we can give people. And so when we pursue things that make us happy and bring us joy, it's kind of like, because again, back to the top of the conversation, it makes us human.
yeah,
And Lord knows it's harder to objectify a human. It's harder to subjugate a human. It's harder to oppress a human. So it's like the work of dehumanizing Black women specifically is a full-time job for a lot of people. And
yeah,
we spend all the other time, we spend our time just unraveling and dismantling that, because we deserve to live life on the same terms as everyone else, pursuing work that makes us happy, pursuing
yeah.
relationships that are healthy and vibrant, like for real.
Oh, this is gonna be my red table talk today.
It's all right. I'm here. That's why I'm
Uh,
here for the people.
all
I'm here for the
right.
people. But yes. Well, I'll start. I'll feed the question then. Okay. So give us your
Okay.
name. Give us your
Well,
name first.
all right.
Full name, or what you
Full.
like us to call you.
Oh no. Full name. Porshae. Now Porshae Gray-Peel. Uh,
Oh,
been the Gray-Peel for about how long has this been? This is 2020. No, 2021. So going on 2 years, I've been a Gray-Peel.
ooh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know when it is.
Wait, when is my
Um,
anniversary? So when is my wedding anniversary? I don't.
uh,
Yeah.
October 2019. So
There it is. She
okay,
remembers, y'all. She
yeah,
remembers.
yeah, I never got it. I got it. I got it.
Uh huh.
Yeah, and I'm by all definitions a food scientist. Okay, that's what it said when I was hired, and there's different levels to that.
Yes.
So I am a food scientist. I believe I'm a food scientist. It doesn't. Let me tell you, it doesn't
Look.
matter what they say. I am a food scientist through and through, and there's a lot of reasons why.
Well, you know what? This is a
So,
great segue into that question. The question of how do you define food science as an industry?
okay. Okay, so what the industry says is it is the chemical, physical, and biological study of food. So, and basically how food is made up. What's it made up of? What those molecules and those reactions do in food. And really it's the application of what that means to like the way we eat,
Mm,
how it's made, how it's produced, because all these things are important, and even like how is like how you can sell it. And then it also would include things like, so food science is the branch, and then under that you have of course the production, you have of course the research and development, you have the food safety, which is a part of production, and there might be someone's discipline I just left out, but that's
they'll be all right.
basically
They'll
they'll
be all
be
right.
fine. They will be fine. But really what food science is, and what food scientists look at is really like how you can develop good food and good food systems and bring it to consumers. So for me, that is the industry standard. But because we're talking about Black people all day today, okay, with our chitlin shirt on,
Yeah.
okay, and this in the background, um, for me, food science is, and like I said, this last month and a half, I sat with it like way too
Mm,
much and lamented over it, because sometimes in industry, food science won't really apply in a very like direct way to us. So, and in the
mm,
ways that it can apply, I don't think a lot of us have been fortunate enough to learn about it or research it. Like, and of course you can't research it yourself. So really learn about it. And then
yeah.
so when you can't learn about something, that means they're not speaking to you. So for me this last month and a half, I've thought about ways in which everything that makes up what, my regional African American Black food experience has been should be explained through science.
That's good. That's good.
And so that's where, like, that's honestly where I'm at right now. I am working, so I have
He's
to.
like, I am employed.
I have employed, but what I found is that, and really it's the pandemic's fault. So if any employer wants to know, why in maybe a decade you will never see me again, it is the pandemic's
Let's
fault.
be real.
But the pandemic forced me to kind of think about like what I was passionate about, and like along the lines like where those passions got lost, and the ways in which maybe those passions can be reignited,
Mm,
or I need to switch what I'm doing sometimes and ignite my own passion and fire, Teddy Pendergrass style or something. Yeah, so that's honestly where I am. Everything in industry right now is like, food technology, and how we can make things cost less, and how we can deliver food faster. But if you understand anything about Black people, and really particularly soul food, speed is not a thing.
speed is not a thing.
It's not. It's not a thing, and I don't think it should be a thing. Like I don't ever want to see like, and there are some, there's, you can find collard greens in a can. You can find yams
Sadly.
in a can. Not sweet potatoes, but yams, y'all. And there's a
Sadly.
difference. Um,
We
but
can we can dig into that later. Yams and sweet potatoes not being the same thing, but go ahead.
yeah, so you can find these things, but I always think about like food in a different context. Food for us generally has been like our gathering place.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, food is like our happy memories. And it stays with you like for a very long time. Like
Yeah.
you could, I remember I went to one restaurant, and it was, I went multiple times. The first time they got it right. The third time it was like, I don't know what you did, but I always make a joke, and I said it was after my grandma passed. I went to a restaurant out in St. Louis when I lived there for about 2 years. The first day I went there, I ordered something that my grandma normally would make, and Black people usually say don't eat other people's soul food, but I was like, let's take a chance. And it was like that day, like I sat on the floor of the hotel and I ate it, and I just sat quietly because it reminded me of her. And that's
See,
so
that's
hard to do for soul
yeah,
food. Do you
yeah.
understand?
Oh,
And
yeah.
like, not you, but y'all listening, y'all have to understand. Like,
It's true, though.
even
That's
regionally, like Jersey Southern people, South Southern,
Southern
Midwestern. I like the fact that I could have gone all of those miles away from New Jersey and found my grandma in that food is
come
science
on.
itself,
Yeah,
right? And then, so then the second and third time I went, it didn't taste like that at all. So I always make the joke. I said, "Oh, my
yeah.
grandma must have been, she
In
said,
the
oh,
space,
let
yeah.
me hop down there real quick, cook that food,
Yeah,
and then I gotta go on and go, somewhere else." But it was just that day, like stuff like that is like, wow, okay, this is what it means to me. And so that's where I am in my space now. Like I still work and I still do that, but I realize that the jobs for numerous reasons, and I'm sure we will touch on a few today.
yeah.
They don't really bring me like that pleasure and that happiness, but
Mm,
in that moment when I could say like, oh, I'm a food scientist and I could recognize like I see my grandma here, and then the second time I tasted it and I said, oh, I know what they did differently. And you could taste old oil, okay, when y'all
girl,
fry stuff, and that's rancidity, okay. uh, you could taste,
just
listen, you could taste everything. So now I say all that to say like it's just about like how you apply. I think you have to apply the science to your everyday, and specifically for Black people. Um, Sometimes you have to be really like innovative about how you even you still stay in it, because
yeah,
I mean, it for a while, including recently, it felt like every evil force or physical presence was trying to push me out of the sciences. Like
yeah.
ever since I went to college for it, and
Wow,
because it's like this many bad things cannot happen to one person,
girl.
but
Look.
then you know that they do. So
And
it's
then
like,
they do, and you're like,
yeah,
"Okay, so
so,
yeah, and where do I put that
yeah,
at some point? Like, where do I apply
hmm,
how do I apply those moments to, like, propel me forward and not just have me sitting here, like, reevaluating my entire life all the
absolutely,
time?"
absolutely.
Um, now I mean, first of all, that was a fantastic way of answering this question. Like, what
You're
do you do?
welcome, Tiffany.
There you go. What do you do? And so for me, I'm like, forever, if anyone ever asks anybody listening that question, what do you
Hmm,
do?
hmm,
Take the liberty to really answer that question, not in the way that they expect. Most times when you hear, what do you do? People are expecting you to talk about your employer
hmm,
and who you are employed by. But that answer really speaks to like purpose and curiosity and passion. And
absolutely.
I'm more interested in that answer. I think humanity could really
Jennifer.
do better
Yeah.
in being able to answer that question.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I've even ever heard anybody look at Black foodways and think science. Because they think Black food is unsophisticated and uncomplicated and simple and not good for you and unhealthy and a number of other like egregious and inaccurate things.
Yeah.
Because to apply science to anything is to infer a certain type of value on it.
Hmm.
And if you don't find Black food to have value, you find it to be cheap and easy and accessible, in
Hmm.
not in a great way. I'm like, shouldn't all food be accessible?
Yeah.
Like, why is it that you are why I just, to celebrate the fact that you can go into a restaurant and feel like the weight of exclusivity in a
Hmm.
negative way, to
Hmm.
feel excluded even in the building. Like, how is that celebrated? How do we, like, we're defining the fine dining space like that. How is that fine dining? Fine dining is the meal. It's the experience. And so,
Hmm.
like, to go into a place to not feel welcome, to be disconnected from the food you're eating and the company you're keeping, to feel like you're in the way, or that they're going above and beyond because you're in the, like, all of that.
Hmm.
That, for me, there's nothing fine about that. But to go into your grandmom's house and to sit in her kitchen with the back porch door open, and the first thing she thinks about is feeding you. And like,
Yeah.
can you
You're bringing
can to
back some memories now,
girl
like
to transfer that type of
it's
care
like
into another human being,
yeah,
like for me, that is quintessential fine dining.
yeah,
Like it's less
man.
about the plate and more about the intention.
Mm,
I'm like, feeding somebody is the most intimate thing you can do. Like
it's
it
love, man.
is spiritual, it's physical, like
Yeah.
it's like short of sex, like feeding another person is the most intimate.
Yeah.
Girl, let me tell you, I used to make my interns very uncomfortable with that analogy.
Listen. No,
In
but
the
it's
kitchen, but I needed them to understand
yeah.
like the gravity of it. I was like, think about any time that what you have or possess is supposed to not only that person's not only supposed to welcome it externally, but they have to welcome it internally.
Mm,
The only other time that happens in life is when you are eating and someone has cooked you a meal, that their
mm,
hands have been in it, their energy has been in it. You're being served on their plates and on their with their flatware and silverware and with their like everything is them giving you something, and now you have to ingest it and
yeah.
take it in. So what other time do you experience that with another person?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
can we be real a minute? And so when you
No.
think about food with that level of intimacy, but like the fact that there is a deeper scope on that, because it can be anybody feeding anybody. There's no physical barrier with that. I mean, with human beings, our bodies are comprised a handful of different ways, but
Hmm.
there's no new models for human beings. Your ears aren't located in new places, your
Yeah.
eyes aren't located, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
you're coming out of the womb only looking a handful of ways. Whereas with food, like the equations and the solutions are infinite. And so, and one person can feed another person, and the two people in that exchange can be very different from each other. They can have different cultural backgrounds and different family backgrounds. And like, so like for me, it becomes really deep, because you're like, this person is taking everything they know about food and connection, and it's all showing up on a plate.
Yeah.
And there's a moment. So like, it's communication. Like feeding somebody is communication. It tells you so much about who they are and how they feel about you. And so that's why when we get into stuff like um separating that kind of thing, like fast casual dining from fine dining, from fast food and a number of other things, you're just kind
Hmm.
of like, black food doesn't ever really fall into any of those they don't even give us the audacity to be fast food. It just essentially is like
Sometimes.
this
Yeah.
uncomplicated, unhealthy thing. And
Well.
because I was recently reading something, a woman had written an article about how the food of her entire culture is considered cheat meals, and
Hmm.
what the cultural implications of taking an entire cuisine and reducing it down to something like that.
Soul food, slave food, right?
I'm just like, yo, and the fact that, oh, don't have fried chicken and like, and barbecue ribs unless it's a cheat meal.
Yeah.
That's in what?
It's
How do
it's
we?
asinine. Like it's just
It's
it's completely it's. But I like. But we know how that happened, right? We
exactly
know how that
what
happened,
happened.
and I think food science has the ability to undo that.
Girl, I was just about to say that.
And if no one else wants to kind of take on that challenge, then here I am. So that's where we're going into.
Come on here. See, look at us. Look at us
Yeah,
now.
that's why I said like this was really helpful in the way that I think knowing that you were coming to ask me like questions like this and knowing that I would get the opportunity to talk about it like this, it's like, okay, but what are you going to do with it? So, yeah, I already talked about my grandmom and I thought about her a lot during this because she was the person who, got me the loan to go to school my first year, right? And, even though there's so much to talk about with student loans and stuff like that, I feel like now I kind of owe it to, and she wouldn't ask me to owe anything
Of
to her, of
course. They
course.
never would.
They never
They
would.
wouldn't.
But like I told you, you brought up a memory in my mind. But I'll finish my thought. So I feel like I owe it to her to take this and to try to do something with everything that's up here and everything that I can learn about it to help undo um those some of those negative thoughts around like our food. Like there's a very famous chef who is a TV chef, and I like her. Like I really really like her. And she came out with like an article maybe like a week or two ago, and it's not hard for y'all to Google it and figure out who I'm talking about. Where she basically jumped on the like, oh, slave food and soul food is bad train. And I'm like, so we're 2021 after we've watched this world get twist turned upside down in our own gaze, because like we don't have the experience. Like we have the so some people might say that like, through DNA we have the blips of experience enslavement, but we don't have it in the same way that my great great great, if I got that right, grandma
Yeah.
actually experienced it. So I was thinking like, okay, so Top Chef is getting some diverse, chefs on there this or judges and chefs on there this go round. Tiffany, you didn't try out, so I'm gonna talk to you about why you
I
didn't
got
offline.
I have some
We'll
opinions
talk.
about that.
We'll
Yeah.
talk.
We'll discuss that
So
later.
yeah, so that's happening, and then Black Lives Matter movement has been happening, and a lot of this like people seem to want to like deprogram themselves a little bit. But when I saw that, like it hurt me. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
like so here you go, knowing your own experience on one of those shows that I just named, and I probably only named one show. So again, y'all could Google that. Seeing how like you had your own experience on there and knowing that maybe you weren't even judged properly because they didn't understand your food. Now like and I don't think like maybe sometimes it's done purposely, right?
No.
But the fact that like now here I am, I'm a food scientist, like, and I'm saying, okay, I'm about to come out with this blog about how our food is actual food, how we're human, and how our food is nutritious.
Come
And
on.
now
We
I
need
got to
that.
talk about
We need that.
off rip, you know. Oh, okay. So enslaved food is not bad, and here's why. And then like
Just,
so I worry because I know, as a scientist, as in our community, for science and even health that has been so unkind to us, it's going to be difficult for me to even talk about food, right?
yeah.
Because our food is already bad. We already gonna die at higher rates than anybody just because of the food, not the environment, not the racism, not anything else, just
Just the food.
not the access, not the no access to healthcare or voter suppression and any of those things. We're going to die just because that food that your grandma made. Like, yeah, okay. So now I have to talk about that, and I worry because it looks more like internal fighting, and but I just wish that like I really wish that just this conversation around soul food that has and so a food system that hasn't really been studied in that manner,
At
and
all.
hasn't really even, and when it has been studied, like you all think that these biases like exist out in the world, and then when people go into their lab and their academic spaces they have magically just stopped.
Girl,
Why would someone who doesn't think that you are human or doesn't think that you're special enough or deserving enough of those same like thoughts study
yeah.
your food in a way where your food even started off as food? Like when I hear soul food, like the first thing that most you know papers and things have said in the dominant space is that it's slave food. It's from enslaved people, so the language is not even correct.
Girl. I mean,
So
aren't we? And we're just getting around to fixing the language overall. Like this
yeah,
idea of that Black history and African history started with enslavement. Like we didn't exist in the world. We weren't even here until magically colonialism needed slavery in order to do something. To like imperialism needed required bodies in
yeah,
order to build, empires and kingdoms and things like that. And I'm like, so the fact that we're now just relanguaging the fact that you stole people, enslaved them, and brought them someplace else and forced them into labor. It's like, so all of those things have to be like unraveled and challenged. And like, what is this? What is slave food, y'all?
It
Help
did,
me understand.
it's you know what slave food? Slave food is what someone told you, and
See,
it goes no. If you take it further than that, then no.
it
It's
doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even
it
work.
makes no sense. It's like when people say, "Oh, I'm going on a diet." Well, food science and nutrition tells you a diet is actually what you eat every day. So you're not going on anything. You might be adjusting your caloric intake. You might be, playing around with some fads. You might be even
Exactly.
introducing new foods into your space, but you're not going. You are there. So
You're
yeah,
currently within a diet right
yeah.
now if you get up and eat every day.
That's it. So the food that our enslaved ancestors ate is food because they ate what they ate, but they prepared everything for everyone
For
else.
everybody.
So everybody's eating food. So you're important and you're special too, and they're special. And that's kind of like where I want to take it because like, even you think about, and I promise everyone we're going to talk about food science. Um, you
I
even
mean,
think
look, we
about
already are talking about
we
food science in
are
case
we
somebody
are
didn't realize that's what was happening right now.
Yeah, no. I even think about like, one of my earliest projects in high school was about African American media imagery, right? And one of the things that came up was, of course, stereotypes around food. So when you go back to last century or however those century things work, it always confuses me. You go back to the time of enslaved people and after, so 1800s, 1900s, and you start seeing like advertisement, and you see like bad stereotypes around watermelon. And so one of the first things I remember, like when I was in school, like, and we had the big library. I said, let me look up, what a watermelon actually has. And so when you look up watermelon and you find out in your food chemistry class that not only is it over 90% water, it's a low carb food and it has a ton of vitamins, and it's not the greatest source of fiber, but it's an excellent source of vitamins, and it has like enzymes and colors in it that's good for like your vision, and it's good for helping your digestion. It's like, wow. So Black people are forever connected to the negativity of one of the probably best foods that you can eat for yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, for me, it's even small. It's even just as small as, something so simple as that. But I think, like, and I'm trying to get my thoughts together because
No, you
I
good.
almost
You
went
good.
on a tangent.
You right in
You
track. You
know,
right on track.
I think it's just like about knowing just that. Like, if watermelon is if watermelon is a great source of citrulline, which leads in the body, when citrulline comes into the body, it changes to arginine, which is a great reducer of oxygen scavengers. So if we heard anything about cancer, we know cancer is caused by free radicals in the body. So if watermelon scientifically helps that process, that biochemical process, then why are we letting anyone tell us that we should not consume this food?
I mean, but you know what? And like, let's live with this watermelon for a minute,
We
because
must
like
let's stay on
let's
my
stay
my
here. Let's stay
watermelon
here.
containing
Let's stay here. And
lycopene. You know?
when you bust out that first blog post or that first video post or whatever you fitting to do here to help school the people, go ahead and let watermelon be that first one.
That watermelon was probably going to be my first one. Yeah.
Because if people do like 3 seconds of research, they'll discover that one, watermelon was not associated with African Americans or Black Americans until after emancipation, because we couldn't even get our hands on it.
Mhm.
Two, so I'm like, so watermelon is not the food of the enslaved African. It is the trope created by marketing and advertising around emancipated Black people or freed Black people. We used watermelon to celebrate our emancipation and freedom. So it
Still do.
immediately needs to gather a negative connotation, because what you had to do was sell this idea that freed Black people is a bad thing. So anything associated with being freed and anything in that orbit of being freed, that's what had to happen. So while it was becoming a symbol of freedom and emancipation for us, advertising and media of that time created an anger campaign. So they connected watermelon with childishness, laziness, with unfitness, and of course this idea of things being unhealthy, down to the fact that you had print campaigns and all types of things. So if people can think about the fact that our relationship to watermelon in the general public was not even a thing until we were freed, is something to sit with and live with. Number two, as we continue and we look at other cultures, other countries, and look at this idea of the relationship of watermelon globally, nobody else is bugging out about it because they didn't have to think about a smear campaign for watermelon and Black people together. It was always just fruit, like, eat the fruit, man. And the fact that it's that hydrating, like, it's something that would have been ideal for enslaved people to eat during their slavery, because it was so hydrating and it was so nutritious. Wouldn't have been ideal to be sitting out in a cornfield, in a cotton field, in a sugarcane field, dehydrated and overworked, and you get a slice of watermelon, and now you have this, your hydration levels go up, your nutrition levels go up, you are being well nourished. And so of course you would not give enslaved people watermelon. So at this point, I'm looking at the current state of that relationship, and now watermelon has made it into the general lexicon, through skincare, through water campaigns and like the fancy water campaigns and all those types of things. It is now a drink, and they add lemonade to it, they add charcoal to it. You can go buy it at the health food store for $9 million.
Yeah.
But Black people still have to contend with the fact that I don't want to eat a slice of watermelon in public around mixed company.
Hey, I do.
Because
every
the trope
summer.
won't die. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, nah, I'll eat it anywhere I want to. But
absolutely,
generally, we still have conversations, and people are still having these thoughts. People are still running these games in their heads. They're running through this process. Like, do I go to this company picnic and get the slice of watermelon, or do I avoid the table with all the refreshments on it because the watermelon's there and somebody's going to say something stupid? So it's like the fact that you still have to jump through all those mental hoops to make a decision about a piece of fruit is wild, considering that watermelon wasn't something we could even touch or get access to until we were emancipated. And the fact that you were trying to create this pro-slavery campaign by connecting watermelon to the horrors of freed Black people, like, is wild to me. And it's like, I have one of my favorite skincare brands uses watermelon. They have an entire watermelon line. They use it as a essence it's a Korean skincare brand. They use it as an essence on your face. They have it as a body moisturizer. They have it as a face moisturizer. They have an overnight mask all of it's made out of watermelon.
Wow.
For the same reasons you just described, because it's nutritious. It's 90% hydration to the face and to the skin.
And then the rind also has a lot of nutritional benefits. Yeah. I don't want it to also be lost that one of the other main reasons why like those campaigns were started is because freed people grew them and they started selling them for money. So if you're making money, and that takes me into my next thing, okay? Because I gotta talk about something else before we get out of here. It takes me into like, if someone's selling something for money and you don't want them to have economic gain and create like a self-sustaining system for themselves, why not make a whole campaign on how it's ugly? And so that's why it hurt me so bad. Not so bad because you didn't hurt my feelings, whoever wrote that soul food article, but that's why it kind of like bothers me a lot, because it's like, all these things are, we can research it. Like Jessica Harris and those types of people have written books about this. But the fact that like we're still acting as if this food style is without the effects of all of those absolute purposeful things that are being
Oh
done.
my
It's
god.
like
Yeah.
wild. It's wild. It's wild and crazy. And you even think about it like this. Like I remember when, and I'm not old by any stretch, but I've been around long enough to see when certain foods have become popular in the modern, like
Oh
in
yeah.
in the sector. So there was the whole, everybody started eating bacon when I was a kid. We had bacon band-aids, and it's like, why is bacon so popular this year? And then we learned in food science class that a lot of times the food that becomes a boom in consumerism is a response to what's happening in food production. So
Mm.
if you know you have, and I don't remember what year, and my teacher probably be like, see, that's why she struggled. Um, no, but like you see that after industrialization in the United States, and people started eating more meat. So after Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, which made it like, ooh, that's what they're doing in the meat plants,
Yeah.
and then we said, okay, we fixed this, and then you have the uptick for meat. You also have the uptick for like dairy cows. So okay, drink more milk is a direct response to a problem. And the problem is we just have too much milk on
Yeah.
our
Too
hands.
much milk. Yep.
So same thing with bacon. And then you start seeing like, okay, kale pop up and everything. Like nobody was talking about kale, nobody was talking
Girl.
about quinoa. No, and so you see like the way that foods, and these aren't like specifically a group of people's foods. So, but I'm going to get
Yeah. Yeah.
there. You see the way that food becomes like big business some years, and acai is someone's food from their native country, so that would be
Yeah.
applicable. But on the topic of watermelon, we have durian fruit that is inside supermarkets, right? And you know that durian fruit has odor causing
Mm-hmm.
molecules in it. But durian, even though it's smelly, has never been done in the way that watermelon is to, black people,
Yeah.
people who are ancestors of enslaved people, or people who come from any part of the African diaspora. Like, those foods haven't had to endure the type of like pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like I said, that's why I just wish that before we write those think pieces and before we get on certain trains, we would spend the time to kind of like connect it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that, like, again, that's why for me I'm trying to find a way to have all of this information just kind of go somewhere, because there's really great information that comes out. Like, so I have chitlins on my shirt. Oh boy, I used to hate Christmas, okay? Because 3 days before Christmas started,
It was going
somebody
down.
would pull out those red buckets,
Yep. It was
and
time.
and my grandma used the sink, and I like, so I know there's like a lot of memes going around about, ooh, cooking, cleaning your food in sinks. But I can promise you there is a scientific reason
Right.
why my grandma, okay, I don't know about your grandma, but why my grandma could use
Look.
her sink as a
Yeah.
large vessel to put chicken in or put meat in, which we know chicken has salmonella, E. coli. Why she could do that and we never got sick. And I
Yeah.
learned that like probably like my second, third year food microbiology. But chitlins, she used to put them in the sink, you know, flip them inside out with her finger, and then take the fat out. And it just smelt from the kitchen through
The
the house,
whole place, whole neighborhood
the
smell. You like,
whole place. And so then, she would cook them with the hog maws. Y'all know how, well, you should. I
you
mean, if you
should
don't,
know.
whatever. She'd cook them with the hog maws, and they would still kind of have like a little smell to them, but they weren't as funky. And like everybody would eat them. And I remember, like, again, during the course of like, school and learning, that was something that came up. Oh, like pork intestines smell. And I'm like, a lot of people have smelly food, but why are we so
Right.
bothered by chitlins? And so I was happy to see that someone had done some research about how cilantro, because of the molecules, and I believe it's like 10 molecules that cilantro has in it, and some of them are alcohol, some of them have aldehydes on them, but when they all work in conjunction together, they can remove the odor from chitlins. And then so
Wild. Ooh,
why
that's wild.
why
Ooh, come
right?
on here, y'all.
I told you I was gonna get some food science in there. So
Yes. Okay, so
yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry, because I was like, I instantly thought of like a cultural fusion moment. Because cilantro, or like what we called it in the restaurants I worked in, is coriander.
Yeah.
Um, we, it has these it has roots in Eastern Asian foods. It has
Mhm.
roots in South American and Mexican foods, and you don't hear it very much. You don't hear it talked about very much in like Black American kitchens, like the
Yeah.
use of coriander or cilantro. But
Mhm.
this idea of like fusing these cultures together in that way, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, wait a minute. If we can think outside of our own backyard a little bit,
Mhm.
like these things go together. Like okay, so if cilantro exists in the world, if its only job is to like help you manage, because most of these countries, your South American countries, your Mexican countries, like most of those places use whole hogs. They use pigs. They use all of that stuff in their own diets, and they use the entire hog. So they're
Mhm.
probably using the pig intestines just as much as we are. They use it for sausages. Let's be real. So they making blood sausage. They making andouille. They making all the things, and they're using the intestines as casings. And so somewhere in those cultures, they discovered that, okay, this coriander plant reduces the odor of our pig usage, and it didn't make its way to us until this very moment, because I was today years old when I found out.
And somebody else is going to be today years old, and there might be somebody that says, "Oh, that's not true." Well, then you'll be today years old when you
No,
find out that it's true.
that
But
is
it's like,
true.
it's just even stuff like that. It's like, if no one, like I said, if everything else is true of our experience within you know our experience post the transatlantic slave trade,
Mm,
if everything else exists, what do you think happens in science? What do you think happens in medicine? What do you think
yeah.
happens everywhere? So like I before I hear any more like no's and this is bad and this is that. And again, like soul food is could be even whatever you want it to be. So like for someone living in a food desert, their soul food might, and I said food desert, so that's another term. I'm counting them.
Girl.
Someone living in the food desert, their soul food might include uh, oodles and noodles or top
Yeah.
ramen for you sophisticated folks. And so like before, I just want to see more, and I know it will take Black scientists who have a vested interest in reimagining Blackness and reimagining Blackness in an academic space and in the science space to do a lot of that work. But before I hear that, like, oh, oodles and noodles, having a high amount of sodium, which if you knew what you knew, we don't even use that salt packet. Okay.
You're right.
We don't use that salt packet.
You're
And
right.
and the noodles do have sodium in it as well, but the sodium, the main source of sodium is in that packet. Um, if I wish I would hear more people talk about the ways in which we in particular um have the ability to recognize like our food as not bad but good on those principles. So and that's what I hope to see more of instead of like the
Yeah.
negativity around it. And again, like, back to something that was said, and I don't know if you said it or I said it, but like when we talk about the need for we talk about enslaved people's foods, when we talk about post emancipation people's foods during the great migration and after, if you're not talking about the ways in which like Black farmers were not able to get access to money, or farms were mysteriously burnt down and there's no sun outside, or like I remember there's a food book that I took in a that I got in a food anthropology course, and it talked about the ways in which like black farmers were given seeds that they knew nothing would grow from.
Mm.
So if you don't talk about all of that stuff and you immediately rush to cholesterol and high blood pressure, which you know I think that most people with southern connections will also tell you how, yeah, and I'll speak for my grandmom and my family more than anything, but my grandmom grew vegetables outside in her yard.
Yeah, so did
So
mine.
yeah, okay, so our grandmas must have been friends. uh, so and so she fried chicken, but she sliced tomatoes, and tomatoes have
Right.
lycopene in it, and tomatoes are really good for you. So so you see that, you see
Yeah,
like both. So and then there's collard greens, which if
girl.
anybody knows how many minerals and vitamins are in collard greens.
Let me explain something to you. I am on. Well, it's funny because I just put out some like new like merchandise designs,
I
and
saw.
one of them is collards. And it was what I did was I took this silhouette of a woman with like a huge afro, and I just like
Mm-hmm.
replaced the afro with the leaves of the collards. Because as I was doing a little research, and because for me, I'm like I'm on this mission to kind of let's change the conversation around collards. First of all, it's a wild cabbage, just like kale is. It's like broccoli, cauliflower,
Which the
regular.
internet says is bad for you because it is a oh that's
So
a
so y'all gonna turn everything into rice. You're gonna turn broccoli into rice. You're gonna turn cauliflower into rice. You're gonna make sure people are eating kale and kale chips and all the things. And then we have this conversation about collards, who is the matriarch of that plant family, and be like, well, don't eat these though, because even
Yep.
though even just pot liquor alone was used medicinally because it is that potent. And I'm just like,
Yep.
how did collards get played like this? So I'm on a mission to just re-engage the conversation around collards. I'm just like, I'm collards over kale all day long. They aren't as bitter as kale. You can treat them in a raw preparation and a cooked preparation. You can
Yeah.
saute them bad, but like so you can use them as a wrap. If you're going to replace bread, if you're getting rid of bread because you have like a gluten sensitivity or you're trying to reduce your amount of carbs, collards are an incredibly nutritious way, and it's a fantastic swap. Instead of just throwing some romaine over that bad boy or trying to find some gluten-free tortilla or something crazy, get something nutritionally dense. It actually has the nerve to have protein in it. Like
Magnesium, vitamin A, C. So like
y'all gonna
all these
y'all gonna
things,
put some respect on the name collard.
you
That's
know,
what you fitting to do this year. So,
and it's funny, and again, like it's hard to have these conversations because unfortunately, some of those thoughts and some of those things are coming from people with this skin tone,
yeah,
and and I implore people to, and I get it. I get why, certain foods are seen negatively even by us because they're associated with pain. But I really implore people to research what an actual man made vegetable is. Like the fact that one of the first things in science that I remember in school is when they had the red plant, the red flower and the yellow flower, and they show you how through cross pollination and breeding and things that it can make a pink one. No one ever said to me in school that if we make a pink flower, that pink flower is inherently now bad. I've watched and been sent. So, like, even, the going thing is please don't send Porsche any of these internet food scientists who are not videos about how, oh, don't eat broccoli because it's man-made and it's not naturally found, and it's found, but somebody decided that okay, I could take this cabbage and I mean not cabbage, this cauliflower or whatever, and this grew, and okay, this tastes good, and we like it. And then science later came on and said, okay, well, it has these nutritional benefits. And even though some people would like broccoli will cause gas in some people, right?
Right, right, right.
So we're not talking about like, so my thing with food is if there's ever a reason for you medically not to eat a certain food, by all means, like,
Please don't.
just don't eat it. But like to watch these videos where, we already have an issue because like everybody's not our grandmom. So everybody's grandmom is not growing things. And
Yeah.
then again, you can't talk about food now without even talking about the drug
Yeah.
epidemic, right?
Come
And
on
how
now.
whole families were pretty much missing because you have half, you have the father or the grandmother or the mom who's in jail for a low level drug offense. And so that whole generation does not get the opportunity to like connect. And so there's,
Yeah.
you study that in sociology. You got the new documentary that came on Netflix about hip hop. So the
Yep.
ways in which music has been defined by, the drug trade, which actually there's a lot of other stuff with that too. But
Yeah.
then like you're not talking about the ways in which like if no one's home to feed me because my family has to work a job where I don't get like they don't get paid that much money. So my mom and dad had to get like 3 or 4 jobs just to make and then still be poor. And then you're
Yep.
not talking about, well, I didn't have a grandmom or a or I didn't have to go that. I don't have an aunt or uncle because unfortunately one of them succumbed to drugs and then the other one was in prison for
Yeah.
20 years off of like a little crack rock. And then you don't talk about the ways in which like that can decimate a group of people
Oh,
on
I
top
just
of all of the things that have already occurred, then we're not talking about soul food. Like you have to talk about all of those things and not in a way where, we're talking about them to like keep re-traumatizing us. But y'all have to be honest with how these things can affect food as well. And
yeah.
then the science, but like, and then food science, right? If I'm not allowed to get a job, so Lloyd Hall is one of, if you Google famous food scientists, you will not probably find any black women, or you might find 1 or 2 people who contributed. But
I'm just saying.
Lloyd Hall is a person that you will find on every list, pretty much next to George Washington Carver. And he said and I did research on him for a paper, but it said like he had applied to a job, and when over the phone they looked at his credentials, and this is before email and stuff, so over the telephone, the one with the rotary spins, y'all,
Mhm.
they looked
Mhm.
at his credentials, but when he showed up for work for his first day, they kept looking like, oh no, this is not you, and he got denied that job. Why do you think like the information about how our food is beneficial or how this food could help us would be here? And he actually went on to, get a job and do a lot in food preservation methods. But think about the people who couldn't even get to that point
Yeah.
or
Oh,
got
yeah.
to that point, but they lived in a different geographical. I'm making up words. They lived in a different part
Works
of
for
the
me.
country, huh? You said
It
what?
works for me.
And
I was like, "That works for me. That
sometimes
works
that
for me."
happens because I get hype, get
That's it.
passionate.
Thank you. I need somebody to get hype about something.
No, like
I just
I think about like what happens if there was a Lloyd Hall in the South, or what happens if
right.
the Lloyd Hall in the South? Because if I'm not mistaken, he worked in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Um, what happens if the Lloyd Hall in the South had to leave school when they were in, you know, second grade to go help the family? What happens if the Lloyd
Girl.
Hall on the West Coast was a woman? And shoot, when did women really start getting those types of jobs? Like,
Yeah.
what happens if because like me, like, and we can touch on that real quick. How even in this current modern food science space, black women who are, by and large, educating themselves at a great speed. But I personally did not. I did not go back to grad school yet. But even in this space, you have to come in the door
Yeah.
with that graduate or that doctorate degree. And then you get into the space. And so this is like, we lead this into like why I was going to quit 1,000 times. But you even get into this space and you see that either the people you're working for or the people who are like in a position that you want to be in were not even asked. to have that. And they still don't have it.
You know what's wild is because I've been pushing this idea, like if you work in food, you work in science and technology. It's just a part of what you do. Like you work in alchemy on some level. I mean, if whether you're a chef in the kitchen creating a new recipe
Absolutely.
or like all of that stuff for me plays into that space. And black people, black women specifically, have been working as food scientists without the label for some time. Like we learned how to preserve food
Thousands
without
of years.
anybody coming. Just all I mean,
Yeah.
and again, thousands of years of history tells you that African culture was already figuring out how to preserve food and refrigerate food and all types of things. It's like we just didn't have the labels. And I think this is where like someone like yourself, someone like me gets caught up in this idea, because I remember it took a long time for me to call myself a chef. I was like,
Mm.
well, I don't have all of the things that the industry says I need to have in order to call myself this thing. And learning to let go of that because it was just garbage,
Yeah.
and because the work the work you do in any capacity, like, is a practice of some kind. So I tell people, like, if you work in food, it's a practice. It's not, if you work in medicine, it is a practice.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things, you come to it every day with a certain hole in your knowledge base that you have to fill every single day. Any job you have that causes you to ask questions and problem solve means that there will never be a mastery of that thing. So when people give themselves a title, or they create titles in order to create justifications around pay and all of that other craziness, that has so little to do with the work. So the fact that you are asking these questions and you are seeking answers around Black foodways, the understanding of Black food, what does that food look like scientifically and biologically? Like, for me, you're in the practice of science. So what else could we call you but a food scientist? Because you are asking those questions and pursuing answers to those questions as a
Yeah.
daily practice,
Yeah.
because you are now having to come to that work every day in the position of a student, of a learner. Even if you had, because my thing is, even if you had the PhD or the master's degree, you would still have to come to your work with the same attitude.
Mm-hmm.
What don't I know? That's the nature of science.
Yeah.
What don't we know? Because the
But
line keeps moving.
mhm. I was just gonna say, but like, unfortunately, and I don't know how many other Black people in STEM experience this, but we know that, and like you said, like Black women and men, and because I always gotta rep men as well. Black women and men have been scientists, or someone in your tribe or your group have been scientists for thousands of years, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to just be in Kemet or
Yep.
Kemet, however you say it. But it was in Angola and Ghana too.
Yep.
Someone, and then I think about me, like, that's why I'm interested in science. Like, someone along my lineage was a thinker, or they wanted to know the way the world works. But unfortunately, when you go into industry and when you go into spaces where people are really like, so the people there, they know how they got there. They know, and even like now, everybody's trying to act like surprised about the way that the world works. You know. So you know that you slept through all your sciences. You know that you did bare minimum. You know you cheated, right? To even graduate. When someone that looks like me, or a young Black man comes onto the thing, and they're talking to you, you already know through them speaking that they have it.
Yeah.
But do I even want you to be here knowing
Yeah.
that you already have it? And like, so I remember when I graduated, I have a running count, and I have the name of every single company that I interviewed for after graduation. And I believe it was like something like 75 interviews. And even now, like, I have a contract job, and the company that I, have been contracting for, they had a job open up, and I was like, oh, I know I could do this, because it was just exactly what you're saying. Like, a research job. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm researching because
Yeah.
I want to know how like food works. But it was I think I yelled at the HR guy this time because this is a different me.
Yeah.
The college me, and so that, like, also, before I forget, like, that's one of my major takeaways for like Black scientists. I want you to know you probably already have it, right? You got to
Yeah.
build up that confidence and don't let them talk you out of what you already know. Like, if you liked bugs when you were a kid and then you got the encyclopedia out to find out about that bug, and then you now you're on the internet and you're watching Nat Geo and you're doing all those things to find out about that bug. You are a scientist, and that means you already know how to research. You know how to, look for context clues and observe and
That part.
hypothesize and make theories. You already have it. So for this job in particular, he was like, oh, they want somebody with a master's degree. But then the pay was like the same thing that I'm doing right now, and
See,
I'm like,
y'all play too much.
so like, these things actually exist, and so like, and I forgot our original point because I got
Girl, it's
flat.
all right. It's all right.
For me, like, because we've already been doing it, I think, like, when I think about like the future, and I don't even want to go to the future because we got
Yeah.
to talk about like where we are right now.
Right now. Yeah.
What I want to see in the next 3 years is if everybody is having like these diverse and inclusion conversations, and you're talking about all these things, as much as you recognize us on the TV for getting gunned down, either within our community or within another space, I want you to also recognize, like, the ones of us who are fortunate and blessed enough to have our lives still here can be of a benefit.
Yeah.
And we're of a benefit because we come from a group of people who have already done it. And maybe, like, so what did they say on December? Was it December 21st? We were supposed to get our powers or whatever,
Yeah. I
right?
remember that.
I remember, like, was that like,
Oh God,
so
that came and went, didn't it?
it
Yeah.
did. But the crazy thing about it is we already had them.
We already had them.
We already had them. So, like, I always tell people, I was just like, if you keep overlooking, and this is, and we're talking about Black people, but to not sound, like I don't care about everybody, because people do that too.
That's but that this podcast don't necessarily,
Oh,
we
okay,
we
well,
we come into this podcast space assuming that we care about people because we are
absolutely.
people.
Okay, so I'll say it for Black people. Specifically, I always say that the cure for cancer, the cure for whatever, um, a new technology, a new way of thinking, a new something might be stuck inside the mind of a kid, a dog, or even an old Black person that you might meet on the street.
Yeah.
So I like, even in that, like, if you care about diversity and inclusion, understand that when a person like me shows up, even if you don't think that is there yet, maybe you got to bring it out, because if you bring it out,
Yeah.
you'll find that the answer to your problem is there. But unfortunately, talking about work and stuff like that, sometimes the people who are interviewing you have other biases,
Of course.
and they come out there. So I mean, it's like I said, it's really nice for us to be promoting the STEM for our kids, and even me. Like, I'm from the, like, go into STEM time, but what they didn't, what we don't have like more conversations around is, like, while you are promoting the STEMs, what happens to us when we don't, when we go to a PWI and we're in
Yeah.
the class and the teacher don't like Black people, or they don't like melanated people, and they
Yeah.
say, you should, here's the book, you should just figure it out.
And then have the audacity to figure it out, and they'd be like, "Man, thought that was gonna hold you up," and it
or
did.
or don't recommend you for jobs like they
Yeah.
do your classmates,
Like they
because
do your classmates. Well, and it's like to recognize that the long arm of white supremacy is everywhere. It reaches into everything. And while we talk about diversity and inclusion, we want to encourage our young Black people to pursue things that they've been told that they're not, pursue rooms that they've been told they're not allowed to
mm-hmm.
be in. Um, we have to remember that sometimes it is on us to build a room.
Yeah.
Because they will never be invited into the ones that already exist. And so, like, because there is a lot of, we need to really look critically at this idea of inclusion. Because while we want to be included, there is a responsibility to build your own space
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you can't step away from. It's like, oh, we want to be included in the systems that already exist. Well, the systems that already exist are garbage. The systems that already exist are racist and sexist and homophobic and violent, and all those systems that exist are harmful and damaging and capitalistic and a number of other things. So why would you want inclusion in that system?
Yeah.
Because the minute they include you, that system has to do what? What does it look like? How does it change?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I think we have to remember, like, sometimes the responsibility is on us to build the rooms we want to be in, and not necessarily wait for the room that exists to invite us to sit down. And so,
Yeah.
like, there's got to be, we have to play both sides of that. We have to apply pressure on both sides, internally and externally. So,
and that's
all right.
my goal for this year.
Well, let me, because again, I tell every one of my guests, we could be on here for a while. Like, y'all lucky we don't do live feeds, because y'all would all be sitting here in these conversations for like 3 hours.
I mean, I think you should do it personally.
I mean, I'm gonna get around to it.
Okay.
I gotta really, I think the community, that separate community I created, because I'm really, really pushing to get our Instagram and social media dependency reduced tremendously, at least for the Afros and Knives community, because I feel like we are policed and censored quite a bit on those platforms.
Okay.
And we can't have like these types of conversations in those ways. It's hard to facilitate those, because even in person, we can't really meet. Like, when when people get vaccinated, we can get out in these streets again. There's only so many events you can have in person. There's only so many places people can go that they can afford and get access to. And so being able to have a thriving online space for, like, to hold these types of conversations and things like that was really important to me. And so, like, I've been thinking about how to grow that community. And I'm thinking, like, these kind of live chats would be awesome, because that part of that community, it has that technical capacity and technical capability of holding like large chats within the community. So it's just like, I've been really thinking about how to do that, because I think these types of conversations are important. People have to know that, like, people like yourself exist, and that you are asking these types of questions and pursuing the answers. Like, there's plenty of conversations happening right now, but very few people are actually applying themselves to an answer, or applying themselves to a solution, a real, like, in time solution. So with that being said, how can the people support you? Like, I won't make you suffer through a second, like, interview yet.
Oh no, me and you are gonna talk
Yet.
like at
we
least
go we, oh,
you're
yeah.
gonna see
We're
me
gonna talk
again.
again. We're gonna talk again.
Yeah.
So for right now, how can, like I said, how can the community of listeners support you? And even if you ain't got if the blog doesn't exist yet, like, how can we just continue to encourage you and make sure that, like, what you're doing is important, and there's no roadmap for it, because it hasn't existed before. And like I tell all my people, being at the front of the line, being the creator, inventor, the founder, all those positions, while they look sexy on TV, are hard, because you work in isolation a lot of times. You don't have a roadmap. There is no business plan model for this. There is no template for it. And you're the one who's creating it for the first time. So food science, in the way it can look, is wrapped up in people like yourself. And so, like, the future of food science, even in the next few years, has your face on it. And so I know that can be, hey man, look, you can be working in a silo for a minute, because the rest of the science community going to be real white and real male. And they're going to be like, but that's not what science is. And like, well, who says? The science you currently exist in didn't exist before either. Someone had to create all of that. And so the way science is going to look in the next few years, like I said, it's going to look like yourself. It's going to look like the kind of questions you're asking.
Yeah.
and the kind of work you're going to put out and the kind of papers people are going to read with your name on them. And so
For
I'm just kind
sure.
of like, how can we make
How we
sure
do it?
that, that you don't hide your light under a bushel?
Listen, I don't know if you could do that. I mean, just as if you feel you should feel comforted in the fact to know that there is a very convincing, angry group behind me
Wonderful.
that you know a squad, if you must. No,
Nice.
that they're gonna make sure. So one thing is one thing that's coming, and it's coming probably around the time that this might pop up or a month later. And I already started it, and it says coming soon on it. I
Okay.
started an Instagram, and it's the Soul Food Scientist. So it's THEE, Soul Food Scientist.
Yes,
But
y'all.
but y'all, even the reason why I had to put two E's is the craziest story I'm gonna tell you. So the Soul Food Scientist was taken, and so I was like, oh, okay, that was taken. I'd go look up who that person is.
Don't even, I
Don't
don't even want to
hey,
know.
if you don't want to get mad on whatever day you listen to it, and it doesn't mean that they can't hold that space, but soul food is like
But
it's
come on.
when you hear soul food, you know there's just it's okay.
Let's be real. If I go look for the soul food scientist, I'm looking for a black person. And if I don't find one, I'm gonna be annoyed.
But if you were looking for the soul food scientist, who would you be looking for?
I'd be looking for some, like I said, it'd have to be a Negro.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I have two E's, and so the soul food scientist
Scientist. I would be looking for a black person either way.
on Instagram. And then I just brought a domain and everything. So
Okay.
I took that name. So I have thesoulfoodscientist.com, and that's going to be the space for the start of whatever this journey is going to be. So like it's going to be blogs. I'm going to do some videos. Like I want to cook with some family that's still here because unfortunately, like my dad, my grandma, and a bunch of like great aunts and stuff and great uncles are now gone, and so
Yeah.
I don't have the benefit of, and I cooked with them, but I don't have the benefit of having it on video and
Yeah.
and remembering it that way. So I want to do a thing where like my family that's left and other people's grandmoms, and I'm gonna
Come
ask for a
on.
grandmom, go see how she makes her food, and so I just want it to be a space where like black eyed peas will be as important as a cassoulet, you
Oh,
know.
come on, girl.
Okay, so
Y'all.
so
Okay.
that's what it's gonna be.
So we gonna get
Yeah.
on here. You're gonna have like 5,000 followers
Man,
before you even post your
man,
next thing.
that would be love.
It's
That'd be
just
love.
it's incredible, important work. I know we've been uncovering Black food history for the last few years with a lot of like vigor and enthusiasm and energy. And I feel like this is that evolution right here. It's like looking at Black food through the lens of like science in a very serious way. And it's just like,
Hmm.
because y'all still don't take how we eat and what we eat seriously. You still throw it away like it's something disposable, but yet you want to use it to sell a box of waffle mix. You want to use it to sell a bottle of syrup. You want to use it to sell some rice. But, you know, outside of that, there's no respect. And so I just
Yeah,
feel like, putting some respect on that name, on the Black food name, is like
absolutely.
really where we going next. And so yeah, so
Yeah.
let me look. I'm gonna thank you because again, I will roll back into another conversation. It was gonna be 4 o'clock, and I'm gonna be like, Lord Jesus. Um, so I just let me just stop now and get myself together.
Okay.
I appreciate you. Thank you for hopping on.
Absolutely.
Like I said, all of the suffering you went through leading up to this day, thank you, it paid off. So for everybody who was hollering at you, like, do what y'all got to do to support your friends, people. Like, I'd rather hurt your feelings in the temporary and make sure that you don't miss an opportunity in the long run. And
Hmm.
if that means I got to yell at you and call you some names you don't want to hear, then I'm prepared to make that sacrifice. So
Yeah.
thank you to all your friends for making sure you showed up here today. Um,
Absolutely.
But yeah, we will talk. We will absolutely talk again. I have some like other ideas and some other stuff that I want to add to like the brand that is going to add more value to the listener and to the community. I just feel like, like the podcast is great and it's a vehicle for other things. And so I'm definitely taking that very seriously this year. And so I'm working on a series of like workshops and master classes and stuff like that, where I can use the people in this community like yourself who have a tremendous amount of knowledge and skill and expertise in something to talk to a bigger audience about how to look at the world through a different lens, to increase their own knowledge base in a few different spaces. And so so there's a lot of things I've just been thinking about and considering to add to what we do. So so thank you for braving the interview, girl, for
I got
summoning
through
up
it.
the courage.
I'm having hot flashes.
She's like, I'm in here, my underarms are sweating. You know, it was, hey, you was great, and I appreciate it because we needed. It's like it's time to like really expand our vision and our scope and our understanding of where and how and what Black women do and the spaces we occupy, even if they're not as big as we want them yet. It's just like, okay, this is just going to be that moment where you're going to be like, Black women just out here creating the spaces they want to be in. I'm like, yeah, y'all don't want to let us in yours. Yours wasn't that great to begin with anyway. So we're going to make one over here. Because eventually somebody's going to be knocking on your door like, hey, I heard that you started like you started the Soul Food Science Institute, and I want to be a part of like your research team and that, and the third. Like pretty soon you're going to be like, people going to be knocking on your door trying to participate in what you're doing. And they're like, hey, I want to be on your project. Hey, I want to be hey, can you come talk to our class? Can you come see our students? Can you it's going to happen. And eventually people going to be like, oh, so we left her out of the conversation. So she just started one of her own. I'm like, but ain't that what we do?
That's my goal, Tiffany. That's why I wake up every morning. I want to be a disruptor. And I have that list of over 70 companies, and good luck.
Yeah, I'm like because somewhere some young like 5th grade baby just sitting there like, this is what I love, this is what I'm interested in, this is what makes me curious and happy. But when I look into the world right now, I don't see where that can take me anywhere. And like someone like yourself exists to answer that question for them.
For sure.
And so eventually they will be able to look up and be like, wait a minute. There's a lady, there's a person, there's a group, there's an organization called like the Black Soul Food Institute, and I want to work for them. I want to push these things forward. I want to be able to do research about the food I eat in my house and that kind of thing. And so that's where it's like I was hoping, I'm like, that's the purpose, that's the game, that's what the ancestors are sitting back here going, whenever y'all ready.
All the time.
Let us know.
And they wake you up in the middle of the night.
I'm sure your grandmom's sitting over here like, that's exactly what this is supposed to be. Yep, you're right.
Oh,
and so, like you, and I'm like, it's funny because when I do certain things, like my grandmother passed in 2017, and like that was like my grandmother she my people still, and I just found her to be one of the most brilliant minds of like the 20th century, and it was just like you could never walk away from her more ignorant than when you showed up. And so she's
the first Black food scientist I know.
And it's just like, it. These women was out here doing things. They were magicians, and they were scientists, and they were like oracles. And so, like whenever something is going on in my life and I'm pursuing something and I know I'm getting close to it, like you feel her energy more intensely because of that. You're like, I'm getting real close to something because I feel her more in this space. And it's like they just sitting there waiting for you to get to get where they are. And like the closer you get to, the more you feel her energy, the closer you are to like whatever solution that needs to be, whatever work that needs to be, whatever wherever your purpose is headed. It's kind of like that they're on that road and that path with you. So girl, yes, do the things. We all gonna be out here. I know we all gonna be on here like weeping about our grandmothers. I love grandmothers. Grandmothers are my people. They are a whole different
moms and dads.
They are a species within themselves.
Wow.
Like it's real. They were like, okay, because that's why people like, are you a grandmother? Because they're not. It's like they get to like they level up in humanity when you become a grandmom. So I love it. Anyway, so yes, let me hit this pause and stop button because I never know.